is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable, Stu Horvath.
Howdy.
No joke today, Stu, because we have a guest. Momatoes is back, chatting us up about the Marvelous Children of Inang-Uri, which is an amazing new project that is currently on itch, and up until December 12th, 100% of his proceeds are going to Doctors Without Borders, which is super, super cool. Momatoes, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever folks are listening in.
Well, we are glad to have you back. It's nice to hear your voice again. Why don't you tell our listeners about the Marvelous Children of Inang-Uri?
Yeah, sure. So the Marvelous Children of Inang-Uri is a world-making game of tension, treason, and a vast living chimera that you call home. So players play as factions atop the massive chimera known as Inang-Uri, and they have several generations to create projects, work together to nurture her and make sure that civilization stays strong. Or if you're a traitor, orchestrate her early downfall.
So I love this. It hits so many interesting little buttons for me. I want to start by asking you, what inspired you to create this game?
So I was really inspired when I played Avery Elder's The Quiet Year. So it kind of borrows some concepts from it. Several phases of building projects, initiatives, trying to come together as a community. But then I wanted to add in a little bit of tension and the slight risk of traitors hiding in the dark, just to have a little bit of spice to the world building genre.
So I was going to save the traitor part till later, but since you mentioned it, I was sort of struck by how the inclusion of the traitor mechanic into a game that is very much like, as you said, inspired by The Quiet Year and a sort of collaborative map building, world building game. I'm intrigued by how this sort of feels more like a board game in a lot of ways, not necessarily in its form, but in sort of the ideas behind how the mechanics mesh together, especially with the traitor, because because I play a lot of hidden traitor board games.
You too.
That's true. A lot of folks did compare it to board games, especially since some of the mechanics are a bit quite procedural. So there's the creative component where you have to draw the chimera, you have to draw and improvise and role play as the factions. But then each of the generations play out in specific steps that make it feel a little bit more gameable than other world building games.
What made you want to inject the fear of treachery into the game?
I don't know. It's kind of been a feature of some of my games. Like, you've interviewed me for Ark, right? Where there is a real life timer counting down to the apocalypse to really spur on that sense of tension and urgency. So I kind of really gravitate towards games that have that kind of suspense, I guess, a sense of action and momentum, so that things will always feel like there's always action, there's always a pace moving towards a culmination of sorts.
Do you think that if you're saddled with being the traitor, does that put a different sort of pressure on that player?
And some of the playtests, definitely, because suddenly there was the pressure to act normal, act casually, while trying to come up with harebrained plans to make sure that Inang-Uri dies early.
Right, like once you start thinking about acting casually, like it becomes really hard and artificial, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Like play it cool, man, play cool, and you're like, well, what is cool? I don't know how to do that. It's like when you think about breathing too much, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the press copy of this game. Now, the press copy you sent out is very unfinished. However, I can see the broad strokes of what this book will look like. And in typical Momatoes form, it's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. The art is very evocative. You have such a cool vibe spread out through this thing. But one thing I really want to compliment you on is you don't ever put form over function. I see a lot of books out there nowadays where it is so striking and so visually cool to look at, but like I can't read the book. I can't figure out, like I'll be straining my eyes. I wouldn't be able to run it on the fly.
Oh, just say Merkborg.
No, I don't want to say that because I love them. I do. And actually, in fairness, although their books are very visually striking with evocative art, I could read Morkborg on the fly and run Morkborg on the fly. They are certainly head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to finding the best of both worlds balance. But this, I think, takes it a step further because I can thumb through this. And I'm like, right now I'm looking at the setup for a chart that you could roll on to figure out the head of your chimera, right? And if you roll 2, you can be a capybara. I love capybaras. But like, it's easy for me to just kind of thumb through this and read what's on the page while really enjoying the aesthetics of the borders and enjoying the artwork and seeing how everything is layered in here so beautifully. So, if you enjoyed Arc, you're on the same path here.
Yeah, that's why I really, really love layout as a design action to do. Because you really try to solve a problem of how you make the content legible while incorporating illustrations, visual elements to make it shine, to make it more memorable, but making sure that it always remains highly functional.
I think that carries through to the game design as well. I was flipping through the rule book last night, kind of prepping for the interview, and I was just, I had read it earlier, but flipping through the way the information of how to play is transmitted, it's very quick and easy to pick up, even though there's a lot of different sort of interacting systems.
It was also a really interesting challenge for me because the very first drafts were really, really technical. They were very dry, but I had to work to add some flavor to it so that it becomes much more easier to read. So there is the balance of making sure that it is clear, but also making sure it is written in an evocative way that kind of resonates with the overall theme of the game. So that was an interesting challenge that happened throughout the several layers of process for putting it from draft to the complete form.
I think that comes across. I think that you could feel that in reading the rules that a lot of thought has been devoted to how this is presented, and you could feel that that unnecessary things have been chipped away over time through an editorial process, which I like. It just feels very thoughtfully stripped down.
I'm glad, yeah.
One of the things that I thought was so cool about reading through the book is the way you approach the random tables. You have folks roll 2d6, the result of the first die being odd or even, determining which table they consult. It took me a second when I saw the table to kind of like for my brain to click on it and figure out and realize like how it was working. But when it did, I just thought it was so fun and interesting. And I was just sort of wondering, like, how'd you come up with that scheme?
I'm going to be honest. I was figuring out a way to get 12 results from a D6, but I forgot that the D12 existed.
That's great. I love it. The poor D12. No one ever uses the D12. That's great. I love it. No, that's perfect. One thing that I'm super curious about is there is an Exalted Feudal project whose name escapes me, but it's like bugs living on a giant dead animal or a dead god. And then there's also Belly of the Beast, which came out like 10 years ago. But this idea of the symbiotic relationship with a titan or like a super duper megafauna is sort of a minor subgenre. I was wondering if you had any particular inspirations for that and what attracted you to the idea.
Yeah, I think as weird as it may seem, I was a little bit inspired by Discworld's universe because it's on top of like four elephants on a turtle and hurtling through the universe.
I can see
And
that.
while the game doesn't quite evoke the whimsical fantasy of Discworld, I did like really that evocative imagery of everything in our world is sitting perched atop this creature that we might not even understand or perceive properly, but who is the mother of all of our civilization. And that kind of theme does resonate across several kinds of media. Like, I believe Avatar has like cities atop lion turtles.
Mhm.
And also there was that video game where you are a civilization on top of a moving turtle, I think. I just don't remember the title though.
It's definitely something that crops up. I totally forgot about Discworld. Turtles all the way down.
Ha!
And sort of pairing nicely with Ark, the giant world chimera can die. And if it does, that's the end of civilization as we know it. So you've brought back the threat of apocalypse once again.
Yeah. I think I'm haunted by the threat of apocalypse.
It couldn't have anything to do with what's going on in the real world.
Maybe.
Like Ark, I feel like this is essentially a hopeful game that really, with the exception of the traitor who adds that tension, I think that the majority of players in any given game are going to be aimed towards nurture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I was a young person, I read the poem Rage Against the Dying Light. And that really struck me, like that hope and striving for a better tomorrow against darkness kind of really struck a romantic chord in me that I guess still rings out in my games even several years later.
And even in your approach to releasing this game, with all the profits going to Doctors Without Borders, what inspired that?
There's a lot of things happening in the real world right now, and in a way, I kind of felt guilty releasing a game, especially when there are so many other things that cry out for attention, humanitarian causes, conflicts, and this is kind of my way of making sure that whatever I do, it contributes to a good cause. So that's why until December 12th, all proceeds will go to Doctors Without Borders.
And what's the best way to purchase the game?
It's on my itch page, but you could also go there directly by going to momatoes.itch.io/inang-uri.
Did I just wrap up the interview?
You did. Yes, dude. That's like a perfect way to stick the landing on this interview. So good on you, man. With that said, Momatoes, do you have any final thoughts on the Marvelous Children of Inang-Uri?
So if you would like world building, if you'd like to draw chimeras, if you'd like to roleplay as factions, if you like interfaction conflicts and discussions, and slight hint of having a traitor in your midst, please go and enjoy this game.
Well, very cool. This has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG, posting things like the Marvelous Children of Inang-Uri.
Very cool. You can find me across social media at John McGuire RPG on the, I guess, like still on the Twitter for the hot second until it fully implodes. On the Blue Sky, which I'm going to be at more on the Instagram. On the TikTok, I'm at 321 Action Games. Speaking of which, we have a new rule book out. You can get it over for free, 100% for free. The PDF of it is free over on our Drive-Thru RPG under Ham and Egg Press. If you want to pick up some physical 321 Action books, you can get them from Exalted Funeral. You were going to shop there anyway, so we have our books there too. Also, for you, dear listener, if you've noticed, we've gotten the mic situation worked out. My tones are once again yet dulcet. So after multiple restarts, 3 different software upgrades, a whole lot of wishing and praying, we got our interface back. So I did not have to buy anything new on Black Friday. We will sound good from here on out. So thank you for your patience as I recorded through the speakers on my computer. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintageRPG. We got a behind-the-scenes look at whatever Stu's writing. We got a behind-the-scenes look at 321 Action for me. We get early release episodes at some point on Friday, maybe on Saturday, depending on how late in the week we record these episodes. But you get them before anybody else for as little as $1 a month. I have a tier where you can actually once a month play a different RPG with me. November was Kids on Bikes, and we had an awesome session. So I was really stoked about that. Stu has a West Marches campaign at the $10 tier. And there's more killer Discord community we'd love to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.